The trophy was still in Bruce Lee's hands when the first insult landed. He had been standing on the stage for maybe 8 seconds, long enough to cross from the entrance, receive the championship belt from the event coordinator, and walk toward the center, where the champion was waiting. 8 seconds. The insult arrived before he had fully stopped walking. The man who said it was 29 years old, 6'4", 260 pounds. He had a tattoo that ran from his left cheekbone down across his jaw, black ink on dark skin, the kind of design that took hours and commitment and communicated deliberately that the person wearing it had decided on a specific presentation of themselves and was not interested in your opinion of that decision. His name was Marcus "The Wall" Jennings, and he had held the heavyweight championship for 14 months and defended it 5 times, and every defense had ended before the 3rd round. He was standing at the center of the stage, with his championship belt around his waist and his arms crossed, and he was looking at Bruce Lee, walking toward him, with an expression that landed somewhere between dismissal and performance. The audience was still cheering from the championship match that had ended 20 minutes earlier, the warm residual noise of people who watched something exciting and haven't fully come down from it. Then Marcus said, into his own microphone, loud enough for the arena to hear clearly, "They sent me a movie star." The cheering dropped several levels. Bruce kept walking. Marcus said, "What is this? I win the biggest match of my career, and they send me the guy from the Kung Fu movies." The arena went to an uncertain murmur, the kind of murmur that happens when an audience isn't sure whether what they're watching is theater or something else. Bruce stopped in front of him. He was holding the championship belt across both forearms. He looked at Marcus with the complete, patient attention that was simply how he engaged with things that required genuine attention. He said, "Congratulations on the championship." Marcus looked at the belt in Bruce's hands and then at Bruce's face, and he said, "I'm not taking that from you." Bruce said, "All right." Marcus said, "You know what you are? You're a stuntman who figured out how to be famous. You kick people who are paid to fall down, and then the cameras make it look real." The arena's murmur shifted character. Uncertain was becoming uncomfortable. Bruce said, "I hear you." Marcus said, "You hear me." He looked at the crowd, sharing the repetition, inviting them to recognize how little the response was. "He hears me. That's what he's got. I just told him what he is, and he says I hear you." He looked back at Bruce. "Say something back." Bruce said, "I don't have anything to prove to you." Marcus laughed. It was a real laugh, not a performed one. The laugh of someone who finds something genuinely funny. "You don't have anything to prove, right?" He looked at the crowd. "Man says he doesn't have anything to prove. Standing here holding my belt, in my arena, on my night." He said, "Here's what I know. I have been in real fights, not movie fights, real ones, where the other person doesn't fall on cue and the referee doesn't yell cut. Real fights, where I got hurt, and I hurt people back, and then I stood up and did it again." He pointed at Bruce. "You have never been in anything like that." Bruce said, "Walk away, Marcus." Marcus blinked. He hadn't expected that. He said, "What did you say?" Bruce said, "I said walk away. Take your belt and go celebrate. Tonight was a real achievement. Don't do this instead." Marcus stared at him for a moment. Then he said, "Did you just warn me?" Bruce said, "Yes." Marcus said, "You warned me." He said it the way people repeat things when the repetition itself is meant to communicate how absurd they find the original statement. 5'7", 140 pounds, warning me. He said, "Okay, I'm warned. Now what?" Bruce said, "Now I'm going to tell you one more time, and then we'll find out." The arena reacted, not with cheering, with the specific sound of an audience that has just understood that what they thought was theater might not be theater. Marcus leaned forward slightly. He said, "Find out what?" Bruce said, "Whether you actually want this." Marcus said, "I want this." Bruce said, "Walk away." Marcus said, "Make me." Subscribe right now, because what happens in the next 10 seconds is the reason this video has the title it has. Marcus moved first. He didn't wait. He came forward with the kind of committed aggression that had ended 5 championship defenses, driving his right hand toward Bruce's face with real force behind it, the force of 260 pounds fully committed. Bruce was not where the punch arrived. His head moved 4 inches, and the punch passed through the air where his face had been. His left hand came up and touched Marcus's extended wrist, redirecting the follow-through past its intended target, and his right palm found Marcus's chest, one contact, light and precisely placed, held for a count. Then Bruce stepped back. Marcus stood with the punch completed through nothing and stared at where Bruce's palm had rested on his chest. The arena was completely silent. Marcus said, "What was that?" Bruce said, "That was the first one." Marcus came again, faster this time, adapting, trying to use the right hand as a setup and driving the left behind it with the real intention behind the second hand. Bruce slipped the right and redirected the left, and from the outside of Marcus's extended arm, his hand found Marcus's shoulder and guided the committed momentum forward, adding a small directional component to the force Marcus had already generated. Marcus stumbled, not fell, 2 quick steps catching himself. But the stumble was real and visible, and the arena, which had been silent, made a small collective sound. Marcus turned around. His expression had changed. The confident performance from the microphone was gone. What had replaced it was something more direct and less managed, the expression of someone who has received information that conflicts with what they believed before receiving it. He came again, 3rd time, full commitment, full force, trying to close distance fast enough to make whatever Bruce was doing irrelevant by getting inside it. Bruce stepped inside with him rather than away, took the direction of Marcus's forward momentum and guided it downward, and Marcus went down. He went down cleanly, not slowly, onto one hand and one knee, the sound of it reaching the arena clearly. He came up fast. He was strong and trained, and he came up with the anger of someone who has been put down in public and whose body hasn't yet caught up with the information his mind is still processing. Bruce stepped back. He looked at Marcus. He said, "That's 3 times in about 10 seconds. You should think about what that means." Marcus looked at the crowd. 4,000 people watching him on one knee, on his own stage, on his championship night. He came at Bruce again. Bruce moved, and Marcus found nothing. He came again. Bruce redirected him, and Marcus stumbled past his own momentum again. He came a 3rd time, abandoning technique for pure aggression, just trying to get his hands on something solid. Bruce stepped aside, and Marcus's own momentum carried him 2 steps past where Bruce had been, and as he passed, Bruce's hand found the back of his shoulder with a small precise contact that converted the forward momentum into a direction Marcus's legs couldn't follow. Marcus went down again, this time harder. He stayed down for a moment, not unconscious, taking stock. The arena was producing a sustained murmur that had no clean emotional category, 4,000 people processing too many things simultaneously to arrive at one unified response. Bruce picked up the championship belt from where it had fallen when Marcus went down. He walked toward the stage edge, intending to set it down there and leave the stage. He never made it to the stage edge. Marcus's trainer was a large man named Derek, who had been standing at ringside for the entire evening and who had now made a decision. Derek came up onto the stage from the side entrance, moving fast, and his decision was apparently to handle whatever he thought needed handling with his own hands. He reached Bruce from the side, and both hands closed on Bruce's shoulder and jacket, trying to pull him backward. The arena booed, loudly, immediately, unanimously. The boo of 4,000 people who have just watched a man attack someone from the side when that someone had been walking away. Security staff were already moving, 3 of them from different directions, reaching for Derek, pulling him back, creating distance between him and Bruce. Bruce had not been pulled backward despite Derek's attempt. He had turned with the pull and used the motion of it, and Derek found himself off balance, and then found security staff on both arms. But in the confusion of Derek's attack and the security staff's response, the stage had become a tangle of bodies, and Marcus had gotten back to his feet. And Marcus was not done. He came through the tangle, around the security staff dealing with his trainer, toward Bruce. His expression was past anger now and into something more dangerous. The specific place people go when pride and humiliation and adrenaline arrive simultaneously, and none of them have anywhere to go. He said, "This isn't over." Bruce turned and looked at him. He said, "Marcus." Marcus said, "Don't say my name like that." Bruce said, "You're going to have to stop." Marcus said, "I don't have to do anything." He threw a punch. Bruce moved, and it found nothing. He threw another. Bruce moved, and it found nothing. He tried to grab. Bruce went inside the grab, and Marcus's arms closed on air. The security staff was trying to reach both of them now, but the stage was congested, and the angle was wrong, and for a moment, it was Bruce and Marcus in the center of the stage, with the whole arena watching, and nobody between them. Marcus threw everything he had, a full combination, right hand, left hand, right hand, all of it committed, all of it fast, all of it carrying the full weight of his training, and his size, and his anger. Not one of them found Bruce. Bruce moved through the combination like water moving through a space that isn't quite large enough, but manages anyway, and at the end of the combination, Marcus was extended and off balance, and Bruce's right hand came up and found Marcus's chin, not a punch, a placement, held for a count, communicating what it was designed to communicate. Marcus froze. He was standing with Bruce's hand against his chin, and his own combination spent around him, and the arena watching, and 4,000 people completely silent. Bruce lowered his hand. He said, "Now it's over, like this video right now." Because what Marcus does in the next 10 seconds is the last thing anyone in that arena expected. Marcus stood there. Security had reached them now and were forming positions on both sides, and Derek was being held at the stage edge, and the event coordinator was saying something urgent into the arena's PA system that nobody was listening to because everyone was watching Marcus. Marcus stood on the stage where he had won his championship 20 minutes earlier, with his combination spent and his trainer restrained, and 4,000 people watching him, and he was doing something that his face rarely did, which was working through something honestly in real time, without managing how it looked. He said, "How did you do that?" Bruce said, "Which part?" Marcus said, "Any of it. All of it." He paused. "I've been fighting professionally for 8 years. I've trained with the best coaches in this business. I've watched film on hundreds of opponents. I have never had an exchange where I couldn't feel where the other person was." He said, "You were never where I was." Bruce said, "You telegraphed early. Your right shoulder loads before your right hand every time. It's built that deep." "I was reading the shoulder." Marcus said, "The shoulder." Bruce said, "It happens before you consciously decide to throw, about a third of a second in your business. That's enough time to see it and not much time to do anything about it. In mine, that's plenty." Marcus looked at his own right shoulder. He worked it slightly. He said, "I've been training for 8 years and nobody told me that." Bruce said, "Most people are watching the hand by the time the hand moves. The information is in what precedes the hand." The security staff around them had gone still, sensing that something had changed in the exchange. Derek was no longer fighting his handlers. He was listening. Marcus said, "The first time you put your hand on my chest, before I went down the first time." Bruce said, "Yes." Marcus said, "You weren't trying to hurt me." Bruce said, "No." Marcus said, "What were you doing?" Bruce said, "Showing you where you were." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He looked at the championship belt that was still on the stage floor where it had ended up. He bent down and picked it up. He held it. He looked at Bruce. He said, "I said some things." Bruce said, "Yes." Marcus said, "When you first walked out." "Before any of this." Bruce said, "Yes." Marcus said, "I said them because you're smaller than me, and famous in a way I don't fully understand, and I was on my championship night, and I wanted the crowd to be with me." He said it directly, not apologizing yet, just stating what was true. He said, "That wasn't fair." Bruce said, "No." Marcus said, "I'm telling you that because it was in front of everyone here. I said it in front of everyone, and I should say the other thing in front of everyone too." He looked at the 4,000 people in the arena who were watching him. He said, into his microphone, "I said this man was a stuntman who learned how to be famous. That was wrong. I said that before I had any information to say it with. That's on me." He held the championship belt out toward Bruce. He said, "You were going to present this. I wouldn't let you. I'd like you to present it now." The arena responded. 4,000 people who came for a wrestling championship and watched something more complicated than that, responding with the warmth that comes when something difficult resolves with honesty rather than with damage. Bruce took the belt. He held it for a moment, then he presented it to Marcus, the way it had been intended to be presented at the beginning of the evening, formally and with the respect that the achievement deserved. Marcus accepted it. He said, quietly, meant for Bruce, rather than the microphone, "The shoulder tell. Can it be fixed?" Bruce said, "Reduced, with specific work at the initiation, it's built deep, but deep isn't permanent." Marcus said, "How long?" Bruce said, "Months of honest work with training partners who will tell you every time they see it." Marcus said, "I'll find the partners." Bruce said, "Good." Marcus held the belt. He said, "One more thing." Bruce said, "Go ahead." Marcus said, "The second warning. When you told me to walk away the second time," Bruce said, "Yes." Marcus said, "You already knew what was going to happen." Bruce said, "I knew what would probably happen." Marcus said, "And you still gave me the warning." Bruce said, "Of course." Marcus said, "Why, if you already knew?" Bruce said, "Because knowing what's coming doesn't mean you stop giving someone the chance to choose differently. The warning wasn't about whether you'd take it, it was about making sure you had the choice." Marcus stood with this for a moment. He said, "I didn't take it." Bruce said, "No." Marcus said, "I should have." Bruce said, "Yes, but here we are anyway." Marcus looked at him. He said, "Here we are." Derek was released by the security staff after a brief conversation with the event coordinator that involved the word consequences several times. He was not removed from the arena. He was escorted to the side of the stage and told that he would be addressed later. He stood at the side of the stage and watched the rest of the presentation happen. He watched Marcus accept the belt from Bruce. He watched the arena respond. He watched the two men exchange a few more words and then separate. He watched Bruce walk off the stage. He went to find Marcus after the official portion of the evening concluded, in the locker room corridor, where Marcus was sitting on a bench with the championship belt across his knees. He said, "You apologized." Marcus said, "I was wrong." Derek said, "In front of 4,000 people." Marcus said, "That's where I was wrong." Derek said, "Your image." Marcus said, "My image is that I put him down 4 times. My image is fine." Derek was quiet. Marcus said, "He put me down more. My image is also that." Derek said, "And that's fine." Marcus said, "It's honest. Honest is fine." Derek looked at him. He said, "The shoulder tell." Marcus said, "He explained it. It's real." Derek said, "I watched. I couldn't see it." Marcus said, "Because you're watching the hand." He told me that. By the time you see the hand, the information is already old. Derek said, "So I've been coaching you for 2 years and missing something that fundamental." Marcus said, "He saw it in about 30 seconds. Derek said, "Because he was looking for it." Marcus said, "Because he looks at the level before the technique." Derek sat down on the bench beside his fighter. He said, "I went after him." Marcus said, "I saw." Derek said, "When he was leaving." Marcus said, "I saw." Derek said, "That was wrong." Marcus said, "Yes." Derek said, "I was trying to protect you." Marcus said, "I know." Derek said, "He was walking away and I grabbed him anyway." Marcus said, "Yes." Derek said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "I need to find him." Marcus said, "He's probably gone." Derek said, "I need to try anyway." He found Bruce in the parking structure, getting into a car. He walked up, and Bruce turned and looked at him, with the same quality of attention he gave everything, complete and without any residual heat from what happened on the stage. Derek said, "I grabbed you when you were walking away." Bruce said, "Yes." Derek said, "That was wrong." Bruce said, "Yes." Derek said, "I'm sorry." Bruce looked at him for a moment. He said, "How long have you been coaching him?" Derek said, 2 years. Bruce said, "Then you know what he's capable of." Derek said, "I thought I did." Bruce said, "You do." Tonight he did something harder than the championship match. He did it without preparation, in front of everyone, after getting put down several times. That takes something real. Derek said, "You're being generous." Bruce said, "I'm being accurate." Derek said, "The shoulder tell. He told me about it." Bruce said, "Good." Derek said, 2 years I've been training him and I never saw it." Bruce said, "Now you know where to look." Derek said, "The level before the technique." Bruce said, "Before the shoulder, the weight transfer that loads the shoulder is where it actually starts." Derek made a mental note. He said, "I'll work on it with him." Bruce said, "Start tomorrow. It takes time, and the honest version is months before it's meaningfully smaller. But you know that. You're a coach." Derek said, "Yes." Bruce got into his car. Derek stood in the parking structure for a moment, after the car was gone. He went back inside and found Marcus still in the locker room corridor and sat beside him again and said, "He told me where the tell actually starts. It's not the shoulder. The shoulder is the response to something earlier." Marcus said, "The weight transfer." Derek said, "You already knew." Marcus said, "He told me in front of everyone." "I was listening." Derek said, "Tomorrow morning." Marcus said, "Yeah." Derek said, 6. Marcus said, "I'll be there." They sat for a while in the corridor, with the championship belt between them and the sound of the arena emptying, filtering through the walls. "Yeah." Marcus said, "He warned me twice." Derek said, "I know." Marcus said, "I didn't take either one." Derek said, "I know." Marcus said, "He gave them anyway." Derek said, "That's what he's like." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's what I want to be like." Derek looked at him. He said, "Then start tomorrow at 6. The shoulder tell is smaller now, months later, after the work." The coaches who sparred with Marcus during those months described a period when his timing was off, and his entries were slower, and he was clearly pulling something apart at a deep level and rebuilding it. That period ended, and something emerged from it that was harder to read than what had been there before. 2 of his sparring partners who had been countering his right hand reliably for a year found the counter no longer worked the way it had. The tell was smaller, not gone, smaller. He never mentioned the stage in front of 4,000 people. He never used it as part of his public presentation. He addressed it exactly once in an interview. when a journalist asked him about it directly. He said, "I said some things I shouldn't have said. I got corrected. I tried to make it right in public because I made it wrong in public. That's the whole story." The journalist said, "You got put down several times." Marcus said, "Yes." The journalist said, "By someone significantly smaller than you." Marcus said, "Yes." The journalist said, "How do you feel about that?" Marcus said, "I feel like I learned something." The journalist said, "What did you learn?" Marcus said, "That the level before the technique is where the real information lives. Everything else is just catching up." He said it simply. The way you say things you have worked hard to understand and have finally arrived at. The journalist wrote it down and put it in the article, and the people who read it probably thought it was an interesting quote about fighting. The people who were there that night knew it was a direct quote from a conversation in a parking structure after a championship ceremony, passed from one person to another and kept carefully, and eventually returned to the world in the form of a fighter who was harder to read than before and who started his training sessions now by asking his partners what they saw before the technique rather than during it. That is the whole story. 2 warnings, neither taken. Everything that followed. The shoulder tell and the work to change it, and the months of being worse before being better. And a question asked in a parking structure. The level before the technique is where the real information lives. Subscribe if this story was worth your time. Tell me in the comments what you think Marcus was thinking in the moment between Bruce's hand landing on his chin and Bruce lowering it. I read every one.